Good morning, everyone. For our reading today, how many of you are familiar with the writings of the neuroscientist and atheist Sam Harris? Some of you. These words come from his book, Waking Up, A Guide to Spirituality Without Religion. He writes, "When I use the word spiritual, I have to confront the animosity many people feel for that word. Whenever I use the word, as in referring to my meditation practice as a spiritual practice, I inevitably hear from fellow skeptics and atheists. The word spirit comes from the Latin word spiritus, which in turn is a translation of the Greek pneuma, meaning breath. Around the 13th century, the term became bound up with notions of immaterial souls, supernatural beings, ghosts, etc. Many atheists consider spiritual to be thoroughly poisoned by medieval superstition. I do not share those semantic concerns. My late friend and fellow atheist, Christopher Hitchens, didn't share those concerns either. Hitch believed that spiritual was a term that we could not do without. And he believed and constantly plucked it from the mire of supernaturalism where it had languished for nearly 1,000 years. Hitch didn't think about spirituality in exactly the way I do. He spoke instead of the spiritual pleasures afforded by certain works of poetry, music, and art. For example, he was in awe of the symmetry and beauty of the Parthenon, while not admitting the existence of the god Athena, much less devote to her worship. We must reclaim good words and put them to good use, and this is what I intend to do with spiritual. I have no quarrel with Hitch's general use of the word to mean something like beauty or significance which provokes awe. But I believe we can use spiritual in a narrower and indeed more personally transformative sense. There seems to be no other word apart from the problematic mystical or the more restrictive contemplative to describe the deliberate effort some people make to overcome their feelings of separateness through meditation or other means of inducing non-ordinary consciousness. I call that non-ordinary consciousness spirituality, and getting there a spiritual practice. So I've only been a UU for 10 years, but it's long enough to know that many UUs prefer intellectual sermons rather than spiritual sermons. So I guess that's already 2 strikes against me with some of you. Strike 1, this sermon is definitely not an intellectual sermon. In fact, it might even be considered a very, very simple sermon. In fact, some might even call it, after you've heard it, simplistic. But it seems the older I get, the more drawn I am to the very simple. And strike 2, I'm definitely going for the spiritual in this sermon today. So before I strike out completely, I thought I would start with a little humor to kind of soften you up. Soften you up a little so you don't tune me out right away. It's a few of those familiar to some, maybe. You might be a Unitarian Universalist if one-liners. However, if you've heard them all already, then strike 3, I'm out. And feel free to surf on your phone. No offense taken. Here goes. You might be a Unitarian Universalist if you've ever been in an argument over whether or not breast milk is vegan. You might be a UU if you think that the Holy Trinity is reduce, reuse, and recycle. You might be a UU if you view the 10 Commandments as the 10 suggestions. One more. You might be a Unitarian Universalist if you dress for a formal evening out in a little black dress, pearls, and Birkenstocks, and your wife thinks you look great. All right. Time to get to the sermon. If you've noticed the title of my sermon today, you're probably wondering what I've been smoking to even begin to think that I could possibly come up with some kind of Unitarian Universalist spirituality that we could all agree upon and share in common. UUs can't agree on anything, much less about spirituality. And I'm also aware that many UUs are not even comfortable with the word spirituality, much less think about having some kind of commonly shared spirituality. Every UU congregation has an abundance of atheists, or at the very least, skeptical agnostics. And many of you, like me, grew up in some kind of Christian church, and you became Unitarian Universalists to get away from all the God talk, the Bible, Jesus, the Holy Spirit, or my favorite, the Holy Ghost. As a child, I had all kinds of ideas about the Holy Ghost. I think it was a combination of Casper and Lurch from the Addams Family. But I want to stop making jokes about Christianity, because I have to say there are really a few things that I actually miss about my years as a Christian. For those of you who are relatively new here, I spent 30 years as a Christian minister. Among the things that I miss about Christianity are the hymns, not the words, which are dreadful. But Christian tunes are just so much more singable. But I think that's because many Christian hymns are just old bar songs with Christian tunes. To be fair, there are UU hymns that I've grown to love and that touch my heart. Blue Boat Home, Fire of Commitment, and Spirit of Life, which might even be the UU national anthem. There's not a time goes by when we sing Spirit of Life that it doesn't just stir something in me. Spirit of life, come unto me, sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me. Along with a beautiful tune, it just stirs the soul. And that's probably the thing that I miss the most about being a Christian, being stirred in my soul. Christianity is not only filled with many beautiful hymns, it has a deep and rich spiritual tradition with all kinds of stories to draw upon. No matter what you think about the Bible, it's filled with stories and parables that have deep insights and wisdom about what it means to be fully human. And most Christians, including most of us here, know many of those stories very well. And those shared stories become a common story that unite communities together. And Christianity is also filled with all kinds of symbols and images found within those common stories. The cross, bread and wine, the waters of baptism, the empty tomb, so many more. And they add richness and depth to the stories, symbols deeply loved and cherished by most Christians. I have to say, I sometimes wonder if we Unitarian Universalists might have thrown the baby out with the bathwater when we left Christianity completely behind as a denomination and as individuals. Now, I'm not going to do an altar call, and I'm not even identifying myself as a Christian anymore. I'm simply suggesting that there might be elements that we might have taken with us. Here's where I'm coming from. I love being a Unitarian Universalist. I love our UU commitment to inclusion, to work for social justice. In short, I love being with my peeps. I love that we honor everyone's belief or journey. But we UUs are so focused on honoring everyone's own individual journey that it's hard for us to have a common journey, a common spirituality that binds us together. Some might say, well, we have our 7 principles or 8 principles. I love our 8 principles. I can affirm every single one of them as part of the reason that I'm a UU. But could I recite all 8 of them to you right now? Parts of most of them. The 8 statements and principles are beautiful statements, but they're just words. And words are something that we UUs have a lot of, given our history as part of a movement which has come now to rely primarily on science and reason. We UUs love our words, me included. And we love to argue about words, which words to use, which words not to use, especially when it comes to the word God. I love what I heard UU musician Jim Scott say when he was performing at our UU fellowship in Florida. He said this about our UU discomfort with the word God. He said, we UUs are so often filled with gratitude, but we don't know who to thank. However, when it comes to spirituality, words, it seems to me, simply cannot get us there. Which makes it a bit ironic that I'm using a lot of words right now to talk about spirituality. And especially since my own understanding of what spirituality is simply spirituality begins where words end. Spirituality comes from a deeper place that words can't even begin to describe or express, which is where symbols and images become the pathway, fingers pointing to the moon. Whether it be a beautiful sunrise or sunset, or the horizon on the ocean, or the Tetons, or a waterfall, or a child's smile. They stir us in a deeper place than words can fully express or explain. No wonder so many people like to say that their church is out in nature. But most often those experiences out in nature are individual experiences. And that's kind of how it feels most of the time in my experience as a Unitarian Universalist. As I was trying to say earlier, we're all on our own individual journeys without a common journey, a common story, a common spirit that unites us together. Or at least we don't seem to have many common stories or symbols that could bind us together in spirit, I will dare call it. Nevertheless, I'm pretty certain that many of you here in this fellowship today have experienced or felt the Spirit in our fellowship. You know what I'm talking about, when the sense of unity and togetherness is deeply felt in a way that we cannot fully express or put into words. Times when you could feel the Spirit flowing among and between us. Now, I guess we wouldn't be a group of UUs if some of you weren't already thinking to yourself, sure, there are times when human beings become more united than other times, but it's not some spirit uniting us. I won't argue with you. I would just say that I know that there have been times in my life when I have felt a deep connection with another human being, or even with a group of human beings, that was simply beyond words to describe. As with atheist Sam Harris in the reading today, just before the sermon, I choose to call them spiritual experiences beyond the realm of words, evidence, logic, proof. And what I'm suggesting to you today is that we UUs might possibly have even more of those kind of experiences where we're drawn together more deeply in the spirit, if you will, if we had more symbols and images that would get us there. However, I believe we UUs do have one very beautiful symbol that I believe can get us there and could become the center of a common UU spirituality. The chalice, which we light every Sunday along with other UU congregations around the world and is now newly presented behind me. While the chalice has become an official symbol of Unitarian Universalism, that didn't actually happen until World War II, when Hans Deutsch, an Austrian Jew, no less, who was working with the Unitarian Service Committee, designed a chalice and flame to commemorate all those caught up in the suffering of war. Today, we often hear the UU chalice described as symbolizing the light of reason, the warmth of community, the flame of hope. All beautiful thoughts, and I'm sure there are many more. What I would like to propose as a common UU spirituality is actually quite simple and uncomplicated. I propose that our common spirituality center on the flame in the chalice, a spirituality of light, if you will. You see what I mean about this being a simple sermon? There is nothing new, nothing original about talking about light and spirituality together. Almost all the world religions have light as a significant symbol. Light is energy. Light is one of the most powerful forces in the universe. It's at the core of life itself. Without light, there is no photosynthesis, and then no life. Many years ago, while living in Philadelphia, I regularly attended the Society of Friends, or Quaker meetings, in Germantown. Quakers honor the inner light in every person. That's kind of where I'm going with the light in our chalice, symbolizing the inner light in every person. But going a step further than the Quaker inner light, perhaps borrowing from native peoples, seeing the light in every creature, every tree, every stone, every stream. Now, as a UU, I know it's not quite that simple. Light can be this wonderful, beautiful thing, but it can also be a destructive bolt of lightning that burns down a home or a village. Isn't being a UU fun? My response is simply this: almost anything in life can be a force for good or a force for evil. Today, I choose to celebrate light as a force for good, and the inner light to represent the goodness and the beauty and the best of the life spark in you, in me, and in all of creation. So if our chalice becomes the symbol and the flame in the chalice becomes our common spiritual connection, as good UUs, we can each still have our own individual way of understanding what the light means to us personally. So for the last little bit of this sermon, I will share how I see the light in ourselves, in others, and in all of creation. First, the light in ourselves. For me to visualize and believe the light within me is to affirm my own worth and value as a human being. or what our first UU principle says is the inherent worth and dignity of every person. And that means having a healthy and positive self-image, even self-love. I have to say that in all my years of doing pastoral counseling, in almost every soul who came to see me, the real struggle was with their own self-worth. And so many times it went all the way back to childhood and childhood wounds that had never been dealt with or never fully healed. And I want to share with you that for most of my life, I felt that same lack of self-worth and self-value, even as I was trying to give counsel and comfort to others. Some of you know that I spent 13 years in an orphanage as a child. And I can still remember my aunt dropping me off and me standing with the suitcase with the superintendent of the orphanage as she drove away. 5 years old. I kept asking myself over the years, why did she drop me off and leave me there? It's a complicated story, but all that really mattered to me was that I felt alone, rejected, and unlovable. Now, I'm not telling you this to evoke sympathy for poor Truman, although in college that got me a lot of awesome sympathy dates. I had it 1,000 times better than a child in Gaza or Ukraine. But at the time, the only message I heard was, no one loves me. And I spent more than 50 years of my life doing all I could do to run from that message. People would tell me what a wonderful minister I was or what a wonderful college professor I was. But that darkness inside me, that wound kept saying, if they really knew me, they wouldn't love me. Fortunately, in my late 50s, I got the right help. But it took 5 years of pretty serious therapy to finally let go of childhood wounds. And when I finally let go of those childhood wounds and began to actually feel a sense of genuine self-worth and self-love, it was as if a light came on inside me. And I literally began to see myself in a new light. That is why I so deeply identify with a spirituality of light that first sees the light within yourself. And when you see the light within yourself, then you are able to begin to see the light within others. This is how we become a beloved community here in this congregation, by seeing the light in every person, even those we don't especially like. And when we see the light in others and treat them with dignity, respect, kindness, compassion, we literally help their light shine. Finally, the light in every creature, every tree, every stone, every stream. This is probably the easiest place to see the light shining through, literally in sunlight shining through the trees in the forest. The breathtaking beauty of so much in nature inspires us, stirs us to want to care for creation, care for other creatures, have clean air and water and resources shared with justice and equity. Well, I'm pretty sure that I've gone past the expected and hoped for 15 minutes max sermon. So I need to bring this sermon to a close. So no time for some kind of eloquent conclusion, as if I could do that. At the beginning of this sermon, I said to you, this is a simple message today, and it is pretty simple. We have a chalice, We have a flame in the chalice. The chalice is our symbol as you use, and the light is what unites us together. The light shining in you, shining in me, shining in all creation. Let it shine. May it be so.